Welcome, everyone, to the January 2024 edition of Cabaret Conversations through the 92nd Street Y New York School of Music. As always, I am your host, Michael Kirklane, and I am thrilled to be starting the year off with a dear friend of mine. She, of course, is known for her work on RuPaul's Drag Race Season 7 and All Stars Seasons 2 and 6. You've seen her in the movie Dumplin' and on Hocus Pocus 2. In the cabaret world, she's been nominated for 2 Manhattan Association of Cabaret Awards. Her 3 studio albums are available wherever you stream your music. And of course, her new book we'll be talking about, Southern Fried Sass, is out now. Please welcome to Cabaret Conversations, Ginger Minj.
Oh, and the
Hey,
crowd goes
Ginger.
wild. Hey,
How are you, friend?
I am so good. I'm glad we can finally make this work.
I know we were supposed to be here together last week, and of course, you were a bit under the weather last week. I saw the
Yeah.
Twitter post or X post, whatever we call it now, with you in the hospital. God, I was like, something tells me the interview's not happening tomorrow.
Well, but the thing was, I had pneumonia, but they
Mm.
popped me full of so many steroids that I felt like I could have run a marathon. And I can't run a marathon in the best of circumstances. But I had so much artificial energy that I was like, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to do every interview, every podcast, everything. And then I crashed out and slept for 3 days. So,
Well, I'm glad you're on the other side of it. Full disclosure, in case I
yeah.
have to stop, I am fighting a cold myself this week, so I may have to mute my microphone at some point to, blow a nose or cough, but we will
It
get
has
through
been
this.
going around.
It
I gotta
has
say,
been.
the only pastime I've had for the past week it was to doom scroll through all of my social media, and literally like 95% of the people that I am friends with are all fighting some upper respiratory infection, or they got pneumonia, or they've got a cold, or
Oh, you were
just like,
you were my third friend with pneumonia when I found out last week. I was like, oh
yeah,
yeah, this tracks. But there's the RSV, there's the COVID, everything's. I was saying to a friend,
well,
it's
yeah,
everything we've been that used to be around that we all kind of avoided for 2 or 3 years because we were being so careful for COVID with our
uh-huh.
masks is now back fighting with a vengeance, and our
Well, and
immunities are not there.
I think I brought it on myself because I was performing in Seattle the 3 days leading up to Christmas Eve. And I was standing in the back, like having a little sip of my Christmas cocktail, having a puff of my cigarette in the alley. And they're like, it's freezing cold. You need to get in here before you get sick. And I made the stupid mistake of saying, oh, I'm fine. I don't ever get sick. Lo and behold, a week later, I'm knocked up with pneumonia.
Well, I'm glad you are on the other side of it now. Full
Yeah, me
disclosure
too.
for our audience members, Ginger and I go way back. I used to sing backup for this lovely, lovely performer. We have been friends for quite some time, so I'm glad to get some of the stories I know recorded for posterity through the 92nd Street Y.
Oh yes, what are we talking about today? Let's
Well,
gossip.
we are digging in on the cabaret world, darling, and I often start the show talking about where people's education in the arts came from. And you have a unique story in that you left high school and found your way
Yeah.
into professional performing as a teenager. Talk about that for us.
Well, I had to leave high school because there were no arts where I was from.
Mm.
And I learned that like I okay, let me start at the very beginning.
It's a very good
So
place to start.
sometimes. So when I entered kindergarten, I had this great teacher. Her name was Mrs. Moeller, and am still friends with her to this day.
Mm.
She came to my book signing when I was at home in Lake County doing it, and she's like, "You're such a success story for me. I've loved you. I've encouraged you all these years," and she really did. But there was a fifth grade teacher at the school named Miss Sherry Dale, who I write about in the book.
Hmm.
And from the time I was in kindergarten, she would keep tabs on who my teacher was that year. Every time I'd pass her in the hallways, she was like, "You're mine. In fifth grade, you are mine." I'm like, what does this woman want? She's literally a bowling ball on two little toothpicks. But like maybe she was 2 feet tall and 5 feet wide, but she ran that school. And she just kept pointing at me and saying that I was hers. And I'm like, I don't know what is going on. So through the years, my teachers, particularly Mrs. Moeller and Sherry Dale, they would encourage me to write because they knew that I was too nervous to be like in the center spotlight.
Mm.
And the schools in Lake County, they had no arts programs at all. So it was kind of just whatever the students created, they would try their best to support it, but it usually didn't work out. And then when I got to fifth grade, I ended up in Sherry Dale's class, and she called my mom from the school on the first day. And she was like, I work with the Young People's Theater Program at the Bay Street Players, which is right down the street from the school. So we've been here for this many years. I've taught for this many years. If you trust me, I want to take your son like 3 times a week down to the theater, enroll him in this program, give him a scholarship, and teach him all about theater and the arts because I feel like that's where he's going to find his voice. That's where he's going to
Mm.
really thrive. So my mom was like, all right, well, she's a teacher. She's got to be fine. She's known him all these years. He doesn't seem to be protesting, and it's free babysitting, you know? And I'm the youngest of 4. So by the time it came down to me, my parents were like, all right, whoever's next, just get out of the house, find somebody clean to drive you home. And I ended up at the theater thinking I was going to, I don't know, write little skits for them or maybe direct something if I was feeling like very outgoing that particular day or not. And the next thing I know, like I'm center stage and I've got a Cher wig on my head and an eye patch and I'm playing Captain Hook in this children's theater production of Peter Pan. And I'm center stage and I'm suddenly like just sobbing, crying in a dress rehearsal. And I've got Deborah Carpenter, don't ever call her Deborah. Her name was Deborah, and her assistant director, Sylvia. And Sylvia goes, oh my God, why are you crying? Are you over? Are you sad? Are you scared? And then Deborah's next to her goes, no, he's not sad. He's not scared. He's fine because he's just nervous because it's his first time having like a solo. And then Sherry Dale pops her little head over the orchestra pit and goes, no, he's crying because he finally figured out where he's supposed to be.
Mm.
And I'm just standing there and I'm like taking it all in and I go, I think you're all right to some extent. I'm terrified to be doing what I'm doing right now, but I also have never felt more seen or heard or supported than I do in this moment. And it was so transformative for me. It was like that was the moment I realized that Carol Channing was right. The safest place to be is center stage in the spotlight.
Mm.
And I never looked back from there. But growing up in Lake County, even after I got out of elementary school, it felt like the arts programs were less and less and less every single year the older that I got. So I did have enough potential and was doing well enough at Bay Street that they started putting me into the main stage productions. I got a lot of acclaim from that. Some people from the Mark II Dinner Theater over in Orlando had come over to see a couple shows we had done, and I got recruited to go over there to the big city of Orlando to start doing dinner theater. I got cast as Duty in Grease. And it was so weird because I was
We've had the conversation.
15.
We were both duty at I think both at 15.
Yeah, I was like just on the cusp of 15.
Yeah.
I had just recently turned 15, and I'm doing this show with a cast of like late 20s, early 30s adults. And it was the first time that I had ever really been around other queer people.
Mm.
And it was the first time I had been around professional entertainers. So I soaked it all up. I was like, ooh, this is the world that I want to be in. I don't even care that I have to like slop the green beans out of the buffet and push it off the stage before we can do grease lightning, you know, like I was just really excited to be a professional performer learning so many things from other people. And then of course from that snowballs and it spirals to suddenly I'm getting auditions. I don't have an agent or anything at this point, but I'm short. I'm still short. I'm 5'4", and at that point I was rail thin, and I sang like an adult but had the body of a child. So they were like, oh, this is perfect. We can get around all these child labor things. He's going to be 16, but he can play the Artful Dodger. He can play Oliver. He can do all these things. And I started getting cast in like non-equity national tours of Oliver and Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, where I played Benjamin for over a year.
Mm.
And that just, it just spiraled from there. So like, even with drag, I got into drag through theater by accident, but it just kept snowballing and snowballing and snowballing,
Mhm.
because it turned out as soon as I stopped saying I can't do that, or I shouldn't do that, or I'm not comfortable doing that, I realized that I was actually really good at these things that other people saw in me. So I just learned to trust them and trust myself and keep going for it. And that's how I've ended up here
What was the
as an
conversation
international drag superstar.
conversation with your mother when you decided it was time to leave school because these opportunities were presenting themselves?
Well, we were poor. We didn't have a whole lot of money. School, of course, it was my both of my parents worked full time when they were together. It wasn't a great relationship that they had. I go into depth about that in the book, of course, but they were so preoccupied with just trying to get by
Mhm.
and then save face with the kids while they were at home, um, that it just kind of made sense that at a certain age we all had to start pulling our weight. And when the opportunities came in to start working professionally and making money doing these things that were taking up all of my time, it just kind of made sense to my mom and the rest of us that, yeah, if this is what's going to pay the bills and they're going to ensure that I'm still getting an education of some sort, it's time to pull me out of school and go into homeschool, which at that point you couldn't go online and do schoolwork. I was part of this group called American School, where there were chapters in every state, and I had to do all of my classes on the telephone. So I would get on the, yeah, I would
How did
call up
that work?
the who. You have these instruction books that they send you, and then you have scheduled times where you would have to call up the instructor. No FaceTime, no anything like that.
Mhm.
You call them on your landline and you go through the lesson with them, or they send you videotapes and you watch them and you follow along in the book and do that. And then at the end of every quarter, you would have to go in and be, you'd have to do all the testing
Mhm.
and be adjudicated is probably the wrong word, but the thespian in me wants to say adjudicated.
I say we go with it.
By
You were adjudicated.
I was adjudicated by a panel of professional teachers in Orlando. I had to drive to Orlando to do that, and they would tell me if I failed or passed. And then I ended up doing so well because there weren't any gifted programs in Lake County schools,
Mhm.
at least at that time. I don't know if there are at this point, but those many years ago, there weren't any. And we didn't realize that the whole reason I did poorly in school, I always got straight A's. I got great grades, but I was always a distraction because I got so bored. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't do my homework until the last second. I would finish my tests first, and then I would distract everybody else. You know, I was the social butterfly, or the town mayor, is what Sherry Dale called me. And I said, "You're the one that wanted me in your class, and now you're complaining about it." And she said, "You just have to find a place to focus that." So once I started taking school at my own pace, I realized that I was working at a level that was a lot higher than
Mm.
my peers had been. So I ended up graduating in a year. So every semester I was skipping grades and going to the next thing and going to the next thing, taking the test and moving on. So I ended up graduating at the beginning of my second year of high school. And it made it much easier to continue working professionally in dinner
Mhm.
theaters and doing the tours and all that.
What other you talked about the teachers and we talked about your mom a little bit. Were there other influences that were really supporting you in this endeavor in finding yourself in the arts and really, let's be honest, finding yourself as a young queer person in those days?
Yeah, you know, I can't really say that anybody outside of the theater really saw anything special in me or pushed me or
Mhm.
encouraged me. Um, my mom did, from the sense that she didn't really understand who I was. Like, she had her ideas, but homosexuality was very taboo
Mhm.
in my town. It was a very Southern Baptist Christian town, very Southern Baptist Christian upbringing. And my father was career military. Once he left military, he ran our household that way. He was a postmaster for years and years and years until he retired from there. And everything was super strict. And he was very much like, don't embarrass us, don't open your mouth, don't speak unless you've been spoken to. And it
Mm.
felt like the only time I was allowed to be loud or be myself was singing in the church choir. So when I started to do that and open up that way, my mom would realize, oh, there's something different about you whenever you're singing or whenever you're on stage.
Mm.
You open up a little bit more. And I think my mom realized that the only way to allow me to figure out who I was for myself and for her was to push me into the arms of those theater people who were like ready and willing and able to take me to the next level. And that's who it was. So she supported me in a very like hands off, just, figure it out. I'm here for you if you need me kind of way. My dad didn't really care for any of it until now. Like now, my dad is the first one to go, oh, you worked with Jennifer Aniston. She is pretty as she is in movies. Can you get me an autograph? I'm like, no, no, because I remember when I played the mayor of the Munchkins in Wizard of Oz, and you refused to come see me do that gay bullshit. Like no. So you don't get
Mhm.
to reap my Jennifer Aniston unless you support my mayor of the Munchkin City. And I mean, I laugh about it now, but it was really traumatic
Of
in
course.
that time growing up and trying to be comfortable with who I was as I was exploring it and figuring it out. And I was very blessed that I had such a safe space to do that in,
Mm.
especially since as soon as I went home, that space was no longer safe for me. So I owe a lot to those theater teachers, and I think that they're really the unsung heroes for a lot of us. I call
It's
everybody queer people. I think everybody in the world is queer because nobody is normal. You know what I mean? Nobody
Mhm.
is like everybody else. We've all got our quirks and we've all got those things that make us tick. And I think that the more that we embrace those and encourage them, I think the more artistic and creative the world will be.
Mhm. And it speaks to, as we're in another era where arts programs are being cut again from across the country with budget reasons, that really just the importance to the kids that you and I both were,
Yeah.
for that
It was
those
so
spaces gave us the chance to find out who we were.
Yeah, it was so weird for me too when I got older. And now that YouTube is a thing, there's a Facebook group for everything that links to a YouTube video for
Yes.
like, here's, if you're going to do the Wizard of Oz in a high school, here's 5 million high schools who have done it, who have all the costumes and the sets
Hmm.
and the knowledge to do it. And it's like that with Seussical. Every show that you can think of, there are online communities and there's videos. And as I'm watching these videos, even though some are good, some are bad, some blow you away, and some make you laugh all night long, I'm like, where were these theater programs when I was in school? It was so weird to me to grow up and hear these other people from bigger cities talking, or like in Orlando specifically, there's the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts School. And that's been there forever, right behind Universal Studios. And I remember going over there as in my late teens. I had some friends in Orlando that were doing a show over there. So I went to see it and I was like, these are high school kids doing Sweeney Todd with the most beautiful set and a full orchestra. And next week they're going to turn around and do Les Mis. It was blowing my mind because we couldn't even get anybody to support us to do a skit for the opening announcements. Like we
Hmm.
couldn't get a spot opening up for the honor roll because they didn't want it. Every penny they had in the county schools went to sports,
Yep.
and everybody else had nothing. So it's something I grew up not expecting because I didn't have it. It was never given to me. But then I got angry as I got older, thinking not just for me, but all the other kids in that school could have really benefited from having a creative outlet that didn't require you to hike a ball and throw it and tackle somebody.
Those are words I kind of know what they mean.
Yeah, I don't, I just made them up.
Who in those years were the artist that either in TV or film or music that as you were reaching out and finding who you were drawn to or were inspiring you?
My two, like the main two that I always go back to are Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball. They
Mhm.
were, I mean, of course, their careers were everything: movies, TV, Broadway, all of it. They were just these gorgeous redheads, and there was something about redheads that always drew me to them because I guess I was from that era where, the old gingers don't have souls. And, it was always like the redheads are the fiery ones. You got to watch out for them.
Mhm.
So there was something about those women with the bright, flaming red hair that was so artificial. They had to choose that made me go, you're already making bold decisions, and I'm on board for it. I can't wait to see what happens from here. Then they get all dolled up in these gorgeous beaded gowns and updos and jewelry, and then they take a pie in the face and fall down the stairs.
Mhm.
They found the comedy in the glamour, and they weren't afraid to put it all on and then get really, really dirty. And there was something that was like, it was like the juxtaposition of that just played with all of those prim and proper church ladies that I knew growing up,
Mhm.
knowing exactly how they would get when they would take the hats off, let their hair down, and get a little too tipsy off the communion wine on Sundays. It was kind of that whole thing where you hold it up as this really gorgeous symbol of perfection, and then you see it all kind of come apart at the seams,
Yeah.
and there's something very funny but also very relatable and human about that. So that's why I loved the two of them and kind of modeled myself on them comedy wise growing up. But other performers that I loved, it was such a big deal when Will and Grace came out, of course.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it, being scared to watch it because we watched everything as a family. We had one TV. It was that
Mhm.
giant console in the big wooden box with the carpeting. It was awful, and everything was so fuzzy. But I remember we all sat down to watch it because it was now a part of the lineup. And if it
Mhm.
was good or bad, we were still going to watch it. And the whole time we're sitting there watching this, I'm looking around and I'm seeing my mom laugh and my dad laugh. And they're not making fun of these characters, they're laughing with them instead of at them. And it was such a moment of like, oh, okay, so I can do and say and be the things that I am, and you're not going to be against me. You're going to be with me on that journey. And it was very eye-opening. So I loved that entire cast and everything that they have given us over the years. I'm one of the few who actually really enjoyed the reboot that
The
they did.
reboot, yeah.
Yeah.
When did you find John Waters? Because I knew John Waters had a big influence on you.
Yeah, so I always say the first drag queen I ever saw was Ursula. And that's
Mhm.
because the first movie that I ever saw in movie theaters, it was 1989, and we all went to go see The Little Mermaid because it was the new big hit for Disney. Excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip of this because it's a long story. So we all go. I go with my best friend at the time. She's my next door neighbor. Her name was Pammy, and she had long red hair, just went all the way down to the floor. Just this beautiful tall girl with porcelain skin and long, gorgeous red hair. And of course, we get to the movie, and she's like, Ariel, 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 she's me. I'm her. I love her. Everybody's fawning over this little mermaid. And to me, the star of that movie was Ursula. Everybody talked about how evil she was. I mean, she's not evil. She's a businesswoman. She knows exactly what she wants and she knows how to get it. I don't see what's evil about that. And then they're like, oh, she's ugly. How is she ugly? She's got a form fitted velvet backless gown, gorgeous makeup. Like that beat was everything, and hair that just kind of had a mind of its own. It was grotesque, but it wasn't gross.
Mhm.
And I thought there was something, it was just so striking. So a few years later, my grandmother would always pick all the grandkids up from school on Fridays, and then we'd all spend the weekend at grandma and grandpa's house. Well, she picked me up first this week because we don't all go to the same school. One's over here, one's back that way. So she picks me up first. And as we're driving to get the others, we always stopped at this one stand, which was a gas station slash movie rental place slash barbecue restaurant. And it's where we would get ready for the weekend. We would fill up the car, we'd get the food, and then we'd rent the movies. So I got to rent the movies, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to, there wasn't a back room, but there was a wall of R-rated movies. And we knew we were not allowed to pick anything from that wall. But there were no cases. They were just those clear plastic sleeves that you had to squeeze the bottom and shake the VHS out. And so you only saw titles. You didn't see any covers for these movies. And as I'm going through, I'm picking things and I keep glancing over at that wall. And there's like this movie that just keeps pulling me that way. And I walk over and I read it. It says Pink Flamingos. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but it sounds interesting. I like pink flamingos. We got them all over the front lawn. All right. So I snuck it in to the bottom of my pile. And as we're going through, they're ringing us out. My grandma's waiting for the food and just paying for the gas, all that kind of stuff. And they ask her, they're like, "Are you sure you want pink flamingos?" And my grandmother goes, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, it's like these two flamingos, they have a detective agency. It's a cartoon." She goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, it's fine." So we got it. We get back to their house and we watch all the other movies. We eat the food. We have a great time. Everybody else goes to bed. And I snuck into the Florida room, which is just, it's a second living room for people who live in Florida. It's this weird, stupid thing. But I go to the Florida room where we had the TV VCR combo. It was really small. And I pulled the quilt all the way over my head and the TV. I popped it in. I kept the volume super low, and I'm watching it. And to this day, I've seen it 100 times. I could not tell you what that movie is about, but I remember seeing Divine for the first time and it clicking in my head. This is Ursula. This is that sea witch. This is who I love. And I didn't know exactly who or what Divine was, but she was so, again, grotesque but not gross, completely in control of who she was and what she wanted to be. And I found something so liberating about that. So then I started to, we didn't have the, and I couldn't go John Waters movies. So then I started to have to ask around at the theater. I'd have to start to ask my cousins if they had heard about these things. And slowly and surely, I started getting all the other John Waters movies and slipping them in to the regular routine. And luckily, my grandparents, there were so many kids in the house, they didn't have time to really stop and worry about every single movie. But it was my education into queer culture in Lake County where there really was, like, there was zero. I thought I was the only gay person in all of existence until I found the world of John Waters. And as like
How old were you when you
traumatizing,
found it first?
this is probably around 10 years old
Oh,
when I
okay. That's
first saw
that's
Pink
probably early for
Flamingos.
Pink
I mean,
Flamingos.
it was very early. And again, still, it's not my favorite John Waters movie. I know people are diehard Pink Flamingos fans. I appreciate what it did for me, but my favorite will always be Polyester, which I think was like the third or fourth one that I saw, because I saw that, and then the second one that I saw was Hairspray. And I went, it's the same people, but it's not the same vibe at all. It was a little more accessible for me. And I thought it was a little, as fun as it was, I thought Hairspray was a little too mainstream. And then I finally found Polyester, and I was like, this to me is the perfect blend of that weird, crazy, campy, over the top stuff and mainstream. So Polyester is still my favorite and will always be. But at this point, I've seen them all. And there's something about it was like everything that those people created. And I'm so glad I've gotten to work with most of them to tell them this to their face. Everything that they created as an outlet for themselves are still a safe space for all of these queer and different people all around the world who feel like they don't have anybody else. And that's kind of what Drag Race is too. I've learned that Drag Race, as it's taken off, it's become kind of like this beacon of hope and light for people who feel like they are the only ones, and that they're never going to get out of their little town, or they're never going to get it to the next step where they can be comfortable and be themselves. And that's what John Waters and his entire crew did for so many of us when there was no representation.
Mm. I think we should have our first clip of the evening since we've talked about Ursula.
Let's do it.
We have a clip of the Minj doing Poor Unfortunate Souls.
My dear sweet child, it's what I do, it's what I live for. To help unfortunate merfolk like yourself. I admit that in the past I've been a nasty. They were kidding when they called me, well, a witch. But you'll find that nowadays I've mended all my ways. Repented, seen the light, and made a switch. True, yes. And I fortunately know a little magic. It's a talent that I always have possessed. And here lately, please don't laugh, I use it on behalf of the miserable, the lonely, and depressed. Pathetic. Poor unfortunate souls. Indeed. This one longing to be fair, and he wants to be a girl. Do I help them? No. These poor unfortunate souls. It's sad, but true. They come flocking to my cauldron, crying, spells as you please, and I help them. Yes, I do. Now it's happened once or twice. Someone couldn't pay the price. I'm afraid I had to rake across the coals. Yes, I've had the odd complaint, but on the whole, I've been a saint to those poor unfortunate souls. Of course, if you do become a human, you will never see your father or your sisters again. But you'll have a young man. Life's full of tough choices, isn't it? Oh, and there is one more thing. We haven't discussed the subject of payment. I'm not asking much, just a token, really a trifle. All I want from you is your voice. You have your looks, your pretty face, and don't underestimate the importance of body language. The men are down like a lot of blabber. They think a girl who gossips is a bore. Yes, on land it's much preferred for ladies not to say a word, and after all, do what is idle prattle for? Come on, then, enough all that impressive conversation. True gentlemen avoid it when they can, yet they don't swoon and fall on a lady who's withdrawn, and she who holds a tongue who gets a man. Come on, you poor unfortunate soul, go ahead, make your choice. I'm a very busy woman, and I haven't got a day. It won't cost much, just your voice. You poor unfortunate soul, it's sad, but true. If you want to cross the bridge with me, you've got to pay the toll. Take a gulp and take a breath. Go ahead and sign the scroll. Flotsam, jetsam, now I've got a voice. The boss is on a roll. This poor unfortunate soul.
Oh, she was going for it.
Yes. So when did you first really find drag? Was it in the theaters in Florida?
It was. So the first time I actually did drag, it was by accident completely. I was costuming a production. I was 17, 18 years old. I was costuming a production of Gypsy at the Ice House Theater. And the woman who was playing Mama Rose was about my size. So I knew that as I was making her costumes, if they fit me, with a little breast padding on. It'd be good for her. So I'm there. I'm at rehearsals. I'm working on stuff. This actress did not get along with the director at all, and literally on final dress rehearsal, it comes to blows between the two of them, and she's screaming and he's screaming, and they're throwing things and they're fighting, and she quits. She leaves. And this is hours before opening. I mean, like less than 24 hours later, this show has to be sold in front of a sold out audience. So they're trying to figure out things. And of course, I had the costume on my body in the costume room because I was working on things. And somebody saw it and they were like, wait, Josh fits the costumes. And I remember Terrence Shank was the director. He goes, we're not going to have a 17-year-old boy play Mama Rose. I said, well, why not? He said, do you know it? I said, of course I know it. I had been there at every rehearsal. And he said, and all the costumes fit you? I said, yeah, all the costumes fit me. And he said, okay, I'm going to keep Louise and Herbie. I'm going to send everybody else home. Can you just stay here? And we're going to run through this. We're going to see if it'll work. And I made it all the way through some people. And he goes, okay, all right, this'll do. It'll do for now. So I ended up having to do Mama Rose for 2 weekends until they, at 17, never had done drag before in my life. I just was doing my best Ethel Merman or Bette Midler at that point. Because, of course, she had just done recently the TV production, which was all anybody thought of when they thought of Gypsy for so long. And I was like, okay, well, I know that I can just watch that. I can kind of mimic it. My voice, I wasn't a smoker at the time, so my voice was a lot higher. Like, I can figure this out. It'll be great. I did it for 2 weeks until they trained in the new actress that they brought in from New York. And then she finished out the next couple months. But it was one of those things where once I hit the stage, I didn't know if it was the role or the drag or a combination of the two of those things, but I had never felt more powerful and I had never felt more comfortable on stage than I did in these dresses and these wigs and stuff. So a couple years after that, I hadn't done any drag again at that point. But a couple years later, I had gotten out of theater because I was working so much. I was trying to like scratch out a living for myself. I was on my own for the first time, really, and responsible for my own bills. So I was working as a receptionist at this mental health facility that I was also a patient of at one point, and not at the same time. Those two things did not intertwine. But
maybe free treatment was a bonus, a perk of the job.
I wish I should have done it while I was there. My insurance probably would have covered it. So I realized I was like, I'm spending all of my days around these technically crazy people. You know what I mean? Like, I don't say that to be offensive because I am one of them. So, but it's like people who are technically crazy. I miss like the actual craziness of the theater, where everything is so manic and everything is so in that moment. And I was like, I miss those types of drama, because everything is so structured here and it's so regimented. So I started skimming through all the audition notices, and there was this one that popped up for a new play at the Orlando Fringe Theater Festival, and it was called Boys, Boys, Boys. And the casting breakdown said 8 men willing to go completely naked, which I knew my mama, my granny, and my sister were going to come and see the show. And I was like, I'm not too proud, but I'm too scared. I am not going to get naked in front of these people. So what else can I do? And I read a little bit further down, and it said, or 2 drag queens, 2 comedic drag queens. And they wanted live singers for that. And I had noticed in the drag world in Orlando that there was no live singing. Everything was, it was very pageantry at that point in time, which I love. It's still one of my favorite types of drag. It's so beautiful. It was all about the glamour, but there was really nothing about the performance aspect. So I thought it would be really interesting, and I thought that there were no other people that I could immediately think of that could kind of fill that role. So I put on some drag, what I thought was good drag, turns out was really bad drag. And I went and I sang and I read and I got cast. And the cool thing about the Orlando Fringe Festival that I didn't realize, because that was my first time performing there, was everybody in Orlando comes through that festival during that week. And you get people from every walk of life, from every type of business, including all of the drag bars and all the drag shows, all the queens, all the show directors, everybody. And we had a lot at that time. They were all coming through because they had started hearing about this new girl, the new girl in town who was singing her own songs. And I started getting offers to come to Parliament House. And like, we'll give you $100 and 2 drink tickets. In my head, I'm like, I'm used to where I was working part-time at Sleuth's Mystery Dinner Theater at like during all of this. I hadn't gone full-time there. I was transitioning from that mental health facility over here, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So as I was working over there, I'm like, I'm doing a 3-hour scripted and improvised show, sometimes singing for $50 and a free half of a hen for dinner. Like, I was like, I'm not used to making $100 to do a show. That was like out of the realm of possibilities for me. So I started taking those bookings, and then I realized I don't have any drag other than the stuff that I was doing in the show. I don't have a name. People, what name should we put on the flyer? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't have a name. I don't have drag. I don't have wigs. I don't have anything. So the owner of Sleuths, her name is Sandy, and I love her so much. I wrote more in depth about her in the book, but when Sleuths first opened in 1985, right, like literally in that first year, they were doing a show, and there's always a mix and mingle portion at the beginning. And Sleuths is still around. It's the longest running murder mystery dinner theater in the world. It's incredible. I love it. I still go back when I can. But there's a mix and mingle portion while you're trying to introduce the characters to the audience. So what this guy was playing this old Scotsman, and he goes up to this redheaded woman and screams across the room to another actor, "Nigel, do you think this one's got a ginger minge?" And she happened to know exactly what it meant, which is British slang for fire crotch. And she punched him and she broke his jaw. So it led to headlines and lawsuits and like all this stuff. And it was one of those things where for years, nobody was allowed to talk about it, but everybody kind of whispered about it. And Sandy came to me, and she decided to offer me full time at Sleuth, and it was great. And she said, "And I know you want to pursue this drag thing, so I will pay for all of your wigs, all of your makeup, all of your shoes, all of your costumes, everything, if you will just take this name and turn something that was so traumatic for me into a positive." And when she told me, I didn't really know what it meant. But it sounded classy to me because I was like, oh, Ginger, like I love Ginger Grant from Gilligan's Island. I love Ginger Rogers. I love Ginger Spice. I love red hair because of Lucille Ball and Carol Burnett. I was like, I was probably going to be a redhead anyway, so this makes sense for me. And then once I found out what it was, I was like, oh, and it seems like church ladies to me, that it seems so classy until you know what it means, and then it's really kind of rough and dirty. So it really was the perfect name. So I took that. She paid for everything and really got my career going, got me to a place where I could go and make money. And then once I started doing that, I realized I had even less time for theater because drag suddenly was paying all of my bills. And I was doing 10 shows a week, 7 days of the week. It was really insane. The schedule got so crazy, but it reminded me of my time in children's theater where we were jumping from one project to the next and we were just creating and having a good time. The very interesting thing was that they were so enamored with the fact that I sang live. Me and my best friend Gidget, who is coming to New York with me to do Broadway, when we started at the same time, and we both kind of got into it through theater. So we all, like, our point of view was musical theater. It was all about singing live and creating that kind of cabaret experience. And they liked it, but they didn't know what to do with us. They were like, there's no place for this. So we ended up carving out and creating our own spaces and our own shows in town. And luckily, the other people were not threatened by it because they were like, oh, this is nothing like what we do. Who knows if it's even gonna like catch on? That they actually supported it. And we ended up like we started a brunch that's still running to this day. Neither one of us have been there in 10 years, but it's still one of the #1 drag brunches in the country. It's won all these awards over the years. It's been there for so long. And I'm like, that's what my legacy is going to be. It's not going to be Drag Race or Hocus Pocus or anything. It's going to be that drag brunch at Hamburger Mary's. But we actually were very well supported by the community because there was nothing like us. There were nobody doing what we were doing. And I still find that out on the road where every time I choose to sing live, it blows people away. Even when I'm having like the worst night vocally, I'll come off stage. I'm like, oh, that was awful. I sounded awful. The audience is screaming and chanting, Ginger, Ginger, to get me to come back and sing again because it's just different. It's just not what a whole lot of people do.
Do you think
And
it's
I always
that
felt if
that moved you, made it easy for you then post Drag Race really moving into the New York cabaret world?
oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's really interesting to me because I mean, of course, I've grown up as me. I've grown up in my body. I know everything about myself. But it's always so interesting to me when people hear me sing for the first time and their minds are blown and they go, "You sing? You act? You like theater?" I'm like, "Well, yes, this has always been second nature to me." Like it
Mhm.
literally, like the theater was not my home away from home, it was my home. And it's so fun to see people discover that side of me. So after season 7, I knew, I was so enamored with Jinx. I loved her so much from watching
Mhm.
her on the show and having spoken with her like during season 7 after I was a part of the sisterhood. I just told her, I was like, I don't want to be you, but I want to do what you do. What you do is my type of drag. I
Mhm.
want to be on Broadway. I want to be a theater girl. I want to get back to that. And the reason that I have done everything that I've done in my drag career, the reason I put myself through the hell of RuPaul's Drag Race 3 times now, is not for a crown, it's not for the money. It's to finally be able to fully marry my drag persona with my musical theater persona. I think that those are the two sides of the coin that I'm trying to make sure are always together because that's what I want to do. That's where my heart is.
Well, and interesting, to me about your approach to cabaret as opposed to Jinx and Dela, who I've worked with and love.
Hmm.
You actually are more in line with what most of New York cabaret is because you're telling your own story
Yeah,
in most of your work. You're bringing an honesty to it that yes, it's Ginger and maybe not
yeah.
Josh, but it's your life story, and you're bringing your truth and letting the lyrics speak your truth.
What is so exciting for me when I go and see a cabaret act is I love hearing songs that I could sing in my sleep that I have known for years and years and years, every nuance of, and hearing them again for the first time in a brand new way. I just got to go see Mamie, Mamie Paris.
Yes. Oh, fantastic performer.
Incredible. We saw her over at Green Room 42,
Hmm.
which is where Gidget and I are going to be with Broadway, which I'm very excited about. What a gorgeous room,
It's
first of
gorgeous,
all.
isn't it?
I love the space. I'm so excited to be back in New York. I have not performed a cabaret in New York since you and I were together last years ago.
Oh my.
I mean, it has
Really?
been a long time. Yeah, I mean, and you know what? Life takes over. Life gets in the way
Yeah.
sometimes, and you go on a different path. But I'm so excited to be back in New York in the cabaret scene in this venue, which I just fell in love with when we got to go see Mamie, and she did her Andrew Lloyd Webber
Angela and
show.
Barbara show. Yeah.
Anybody who knows me, and I'm sorry if Barbara, I see you over here in this room. I'm sorry if you're a big Andrew Lloyd Webber fan, but anybody who knows me knows that that music just grates on my nerves after a while because to me, every show of Andrew Lloyd Webber's is always 3 songs done 100 different ways, which is fine. It's fine, but I also really loved Stephen Sondheim growing up because everything was so different and so unexpected.
Hmm.
So I'm sitting there going, I love this woman. I love this performer. I've seen her before. I don't know if I can sit through an hour's worth of Andrew Lloyd Webber music. Every single song that she sang was like I was hearing it for the first time. It was
Yeah.
interpreted so differently. It was so exciting, and it made me actually go back and listen to all of these cast recordings for all of these shows from Andrew Lloyd Webber that I had stopped listening to decades ago
Mm.
because I was like, I can't listen to this anymore. I can't. I know you got out a dictionary and you looked up every color in the world. Yeah, red and yellow and green. I don't want to hear it. And then all of a sudden I found myself excited to listen to the originals again. And it like renewed this kind of love affair with me and Andrew Lloyd Webber to the point where I'm listening to it now in my regular rotation and
Mm.
enjoying it. And to me that's what I love when I go and see any kind of cabaret is somebody who could take something that bores me because I've heard it too much and then just completely build it from scratch and make me
Mhm.
love it again.
Well, it's the story, also the storytelling side of cabaret as an art form,
Hmm.
that we're letting the lyrics, and I say this in some of the other interviews we've done on the series, but it's a lyric driven art form where, yes, we love a great singer, but some of the great New York City cabaret performers aren't necessarily the best technical singers. They're
No.
fantastic storytellers.
I'm so sad that I love Broadway no matter what it is. I love a diva in all of her
Hmm.
shining belting glory, but I do miss the days where we were nurturing people like Ethel Merman and Patti LuPone and Bernadette Peters. These people are not pretty singers, but they're beautiful singers. There's so much
Yeah.
character to their voice. They make you feel something. I just went and saw the Color Purple movie. I
Hmm.
remember when the original production came out, I saw every Seeley there was. I love that show. I saw every Shug in the last revival. Like I just love it so much. But I remember when Fantasia took over, I went to see her final performance, and it was one of those experiences where I did not love her on American Idol. I thought she was great, but I was like a Jennifer Hudson fan,
Hmm.
that big belting Broadway voice. But I always said there's so much character in there that Fantasia can make you feel something. And then when I went and saw her as Celie on Broadway, she took this story and these songs that I had been going to and experiencing for a couple years at that point and made them so new for me.
Hmm.
So when she did the movie, I'm first in line. I've got to go see it. She's brilliant. And there's something about her and the way she speaks and the way she sings, where before she even sings a word, you feel exactly what her intention is. You feel exactly where she's going with it. And she places you emotionally right there with her. And to me, that is just the hallmark of a great communicator. And
Hmm.
that's what I want to be as a cabaret artist. I don't necessarily want to be the best singer. I want to be a great communicator.
It's the thing about the art form to me that, and other teachers have said this, and that's where I heard it first was from, I believe, Lena Katrakis was the first person I heard say this. But it's that in cabaret, the audience becomes our scene partner, and it is really just
Hmm.
that communication in
Yeah.
such a small room when you're
Hmm.
dealing with 30 to 100 people.
But you remember the very first run of Crossdresser for Christ,
Mhm.
right after season 7, where one performance would be an hour and the next would be an hour and a half. And it wasn't me being self-indulgent. It was just when you feel supported by the
Yeah.
people who are there with you, when you feel like this camaraderie in the room, you feel like everybody's there for the same reason, you open up a little bit more, you
Mhm.
share a little bit more. And so the stories would get a little deeper. I would let the audience in to what makes me tick a little bit more than I would the night before. And that was the really special thing for me. That I've done cabarets. I had done cabarets before, but they were very surface level. It's like
Right.
we're doing a fundraiser, so let me go sing some songs and chit chat with the audience. Crossdresser for Christ was the first time that I was like, I'm in New York. I'm in this beautiful cabaret space. It's just famous for people sharing themselves. So let me share myself. And as I
Mhm.
opened up more and more and more, I really realized that that's what I want to do and that's where I want to be. That's why I wrote the book. Was because I started sharing those stories and people would come up to me afterwards in tears, either
Mhm.
laughing or crying, going, "Your story is my story," which is so weird because I am an African American lawyer, and I have never done drag before in my life. I know nothing about the gay world, but I saw you on TV, wanted to come see you tonight, and I realized we have so much more in common than I
Yeah.
thought. And that's what I started to learn as I traveled the world and started to tell the story, was that we all have a lot more in common than we think we actually do. And if we stop talking at each other and start talking with each other, it's just opening up those lines of communication. You learn that my journey is your journey and yours is hers and his.
Mhm.
That's the really exciting thing for me. And that's why I will never, ever give up being able to perform in cabaret spaces and having that one-on-one interaction with audience members.
Is that what then led you into writing your own music? 'Cause so much of your
Yeah, well,
music
to me,
is
music is,
so personal.
yeah, you know, uh, the whole second album was my experience. So I wrote Sweet Tea, which we
Mhm.
premiered at the Beachman, and I wrote that as because I hadn't gone to therapy enough, honestly. It
Mm.
was one of those things where I was being pushed to do an album after season 7 by my management and a couple of different producers. They were like, just do it, do some songs. I said, I don't do drag music. And they were like, "Oh, are you too good for it?" I said, "I'm not too good for it, but I don't get it. Like that's not my realm. I wouldn't do it well. It would be very false. I don't do anything that I would naturally do because I'm one of those types of people where you can smell bullshit from a mile away. I think everybody can. And
Yeah.
if you do something that's not authentic to you, people aren't going to latch onto it because they don't care, because you don't care. So I said, if we're going to do music, can we just kind of take it into a little bit more of a serious route? Can I do like, I call it my Adele album. And I didn't realize I had so many deep feelings that I was working through at the time. But it was a way for me to explore these journals and these letters that I had written
Mhm.
decades prior, things, all this trauma that I was holding on to for so many years. It was my going, I'm gonna kiss it, I'm gonna bless it, and I'm gonna release it up into
Yeah.
heaven and let whatever else be done with it because then it will no longer be on me. And so I did that and it did really well. But then I realized when I was performing in nightclubs at 2 o'clock in the morning in Des Moines, Iowa, they don't want to hear a sad song about your father leaving. They want something fun. So we wrote Gummy Bear, the second album, as all just kind of club fun music, but we did it in a way that it's still very personal because I spent a lot of my time calling drag queen bingo. So there's a song on there called Bingo Queen. RuPaul always makes fun of me because I'm a huge lover of dad jokes. So I had to write it. She was like, "You're a Rolodex of dad jokes." So I started writing a song called Dad Jokes. And like everything on there is still personal, but it's super silly. And then I grew up with country music,
Yeah.
and it was one of those things where it was part of my childhood, ingrained in me so much that it was one of the things I turned my back on because I felt like it was part of the problem.
Mm.
But I would still listen to country music all the time and sing along to it all the time. And every time I would do it at karaoke, everybody would go, "Well, that's what your voice is. Your voice is country. You got that twang. You got this. You got the soul to sing country." And then we did All Star 6, and our last challenge, of course, was the country song with Tanya Tucker. So even Tanya Tucker's like, "Well, you can sing, like you can really sing country." And it pushed me to go, "All right, I'm gonna embrace it." I
Mm.
feel like there are no two worlds as diametrically opposed as country music and drag, but I'm going to see what'll happen. And I did it. And it was the most personal to me because it wasn't about things that happened in my past. It was about what I was going through in my present, things I was still processing day to day. Um, and it was so cathartic to be able to do that. And it felt like the first time I had really been able to use my authentic voice, not just my actual authentic voice, but my authentic writing voice.
Mm.
And then the most surprising thing was it wasn't the Drag Race fans that latched onto it. it was the country music fans. And it suddenly started making it onto all these major country music playlists. It started getting actual radio time and climbing up the charts in country. And I have never felt so instantly embraced or understood by a group of people as I did by the country music fans, which was mind blowing to me.
Well, I think we should listen to one of those songs.
Let's listen to it.
I've got Walk Tall here for us.
My favorite.
Daddy gave me a baseball bat, Little League, NASCAR, all of that. Wouldn't let me fall far from that tree. Everything I ever wanted was in the back of Mama's closet. When they weren't looking, that's where I'd be. No, I didn't understand. I was always gonna be my own kind of man. You gotta carry on. You gotta find your own way. You don't know the strength that you're made of. When they say you're wrong, you just stand up straight. If the world is trying to make you feel small, you gotta walk tall. Walk tall. Never thought that I was smarter than anyone back in that old holler, but I knew enough to know what was wrong or right. Folks say that I've been falling, turned my back, ignored my calling. I just went out looking for a better life. And though I didn't understand that I'd become the woman that I am, you gotta carry on. You gotta find your own way. You don't know the strength that you're made of. Cause when they say you're wrong, you just stand up straight. And if the world is trying to make you feel small, you gotta walk tall. Ooh, walk tall. You gotta walk tall. Oh, walk tall. You gotta carry on. You gotta find your own way. You don't know the strength that you're made of. When they say you're wrong, you just stand up straight. And if the world is trying to make you feel small, and this world will try to make you feel so small, so put your heels on and walk tall.
I love that song.
I love that song too. That was it was the last song that we wrote for the album, but the first song that we started. And it was all about the story that I had told on All Star 6 about my mother and by me my ruby slippers, my first pair, and all of that being like such a gesture, so like one of the kindest things that ever happened to me. And I wanted to be able to encapsulate that in a way that didn't tell the story in a linear way. Like I wanted it to be something that everybody could get the pieces of and feel like it was reflecting their journey and them as well. So it wasn't until everything else was already written and recorded and we went, okay, I think I get it now. I think I got exactly what we want to say. We sat down, we wrote it, we recorded it, and just
Who are your co-writers?
It still is. Brandon Stansel, who is an incredible queer country singer, and Jeffrey James, who is an incredible redheaded country singer, who is an ally, but not queer himself. But not everybody's perfect, so it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me, Ginger, as a friend and watching your career over the, almost decade we've known each other, how it
Mm-hmm.
is, how it's the same themes that have grown in moving into wanting to tell your own your truth on stage in Cabaret, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how you wanted to be known, and moving that then into the writing of their music, and then to move those stories into Southern
Into
Fried
the book.
Sass.
Yeah.
What brought the book up? How did this come to be?
So I, I've been asked to do a book many times since season 7, and I love books. I mean, like books growing up, they were my another safe space for me because I could be by myself, but in
Mhm.
an entirely different world. Um, but I had never written a book, so I didn't know how to even go about that. And then when I was my first summer in P Town, I've been very blessed. The last 3 years, I've had 3 completely sold out full summers in P Town at the Art House. It's been amazing. I love it. I love being a P Town girl. But my first year was literally at the end of All Star 6.
Mhm.
So I was just mentally in such a weird place, that not a bad place, but a vulnerable place,
Mhm.
that I was doing my big gay cabaret, which you've seen that show, and that's just
Yeah.
me. I literally, like, we pull songs out of a hat and I tell stories that relate to the song. So every performance is completely different. And it's just different stories of songs that have touched me throughout my life. And we were doing that show, and I got caught up on one story that we were all, us, everybody in the whole audience, we were laughing so hard we were crying, and then we were crying so hard because we were crying. And it was one of those rare moments with an audience where you feel the emotional resonance through the room of every single person. And unbeknownst to me, my editor, Michelle, who I had not met at that point, she and her wife had come to see that show.
Oh.
They just randomly happened to be in P Town. She works at Simon and Schuster. She's very high up there, and she sent back a message. She was like, "I would really like to meet Ginger after the show." Of course, CJ, my husband, is like, "Well, meet and greet is sold out. I'll see what I can do." She's like, "No, I don't. I don't want to meet and greet. I just want to talk to her." So we did the meet and greet, and then she came back to the dressing room. She's like, "You were robbed, and I will give you $100,000 right now if you will just sign this contract and tell your story because the
Mm.
world needs to hear it." I said, "What?" She's like, "I work for Simon and Schuster. I really want you to tell the story. I want a book. I want all of it. I want the world to be able to experience what I just experienced in that room." And so that was 3 years ago. It took us 2.5 years to write the book and then get it ready for release. And it just, I had the worst panic attack of my life the night before the book released,
Mm.
because all of a sudden I went, there are things in that book I've never told a therapist. There are things that nobody knows in that book. I have never been more vulnerable than I was in those pages. And I didn't know how the world was going to react to that, because they're used to seeing, at least in major media, they're used to seeing an editor's view of who I am and what my story
Right.
is. I'm not usually in charge of the full narrative. And this was the first time where I was like,
Excuse
I'm
me.
in control of this and I'm sharing it, and I don't know how they're going to respond. And the response has been overwhelmingly positive, overwhelmingly um, just like soul touching. Like it
Mhm.
really, like it reaches me on a level that I never thought anything would.
Mm.
Where I feel like the synergy with all these people who are now discovering me through the book. And that's the coolest thing is, yeah, it's nice to fill in all the dots, all the space between the dots for the people who have followed my career for a decade now, since Drag Race, or even longer, since before Drag Race. But it's also really interesting for all of these like middle-aged housewives from the Midwest who are like, "Oh, a new cookbook. Let me grab this and skim
Yes.
through it." People who are discovering me for the first time authentically through my story, it's really giving them a very different view than I think other people have of me. So it's
Mhm.
really interesting to see that juxtaposition. And the coolest thing about it is that I never thought about this, but people are making the recipes and then tagging me in them.
Yeah,
So
I've
I
seen
get to
that. I love
see
that.
all of these interpretations of like the meatloaf that I grew up with. Some of them look nothing like it. Some of them look exactly like my mother. Some look better. But all of them, I'm like, this is like it's taking me back to this really warm, comfortable space in my childhood. And it's really cool that people who I've never met are experiencing that. All from a book.
Love that. Sadly, we are getting to the end of my time to ask you questions before I go to some questions from the audience. But we need to talk about the other things you've got coming up. We've talked about your albums. We've talked about Southern Fried Sass, the book. I'm holding it up again to make sure that everyone who is watching us live or watches the recording after, if
And
they
it's a
haven't gotten the book,
beautiful
go
book.
it. The photos in this book, Ginge,
It is gorgeous.
are
And I can say
so
that because I
gorgeous.
didn't print the book myself. Like somebody else was responsible for it, but it was so beautifully done.
It's so, and I haven't read it. I haven't cooked anything from it yet. I will, but like these pictures are so gorgeous.
And we shot them all in less than 48 hours, including the food. It was wild.
That's crazy.
It was so wild.
But we
It
have to
was
talk
the
about.
day after Thanksgiving. Oh, sorry. We rented this house in White Plains, New York, because it had 2 kitchens. It was expansive, and we could do every shot that we needed to do there. So it's 2 days. Oh, it was the day after Thanksgiving. We had 48 hours. We get there, and we had I had a dresser and a hair person, and my husband and our roommate Michael did all the food, and we had one photographer with one assistant. So there was like maybe a team of 8 of us total in this house. Boom, 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 boom. It was so crazy that at the end of the second day, we all kind of collapsed and went, "Whew, what the hell did we just do?
Did we
We
just
didn't
do
even know if
that?
we had good shots." And then we started looking through them, and we were like, "Oh, this is really special. It's really good."
You've got so many other great things coming up. We've mentioned it, but let's talk about This Broad's Way because it's you kind of doing a mini tour of the show.
Yeah, so it was our show this past summer in P Town,
Yep.
and all the review. I mean, we got standing ovations every night, and multiple standing ovations every night. I do it a disservice to say a laugh every 30 seconds. There's really a laugh every like 10 seconds in this one. It's hysterical. It is our tribute to Broadway. I like to call it Forbidden Broadway with the glitter on top, because it has all of the drag sensibility of the fashion and the sequins and the rhinestones. Like it's very
Mhm.
polished and it looks gorgeous, but we're also just taking the piss out of Broadway. And it's me and Gidget playing all these roles that we
Yeah.
will probably never ever get casted in real life. So it's our chance to do it. And we're really doing it. I go and sing Rose's Turn and then immediately turn around and come back out, and the two of us dance the Hot Honey Rag.
Love it.
And I'm like, we actually do it. I looked at her. Oh, we did it in P Town, and it's so hot in the summer, and there's no dressing room that's like right there. There's no backstage area, so you literally do the costume changes in the alleyway while people walking down Commercial Street are staring and like, oh, this is the real show. Yeah, it is. Still, buy a ticket. Um, and I'm looking at her, and she's laughing because my eyebrow had sweated all the way down to my cheek, and I had no other makeup on, just that. And I looked at her, she was like, "You look like hell." I said, "Who wrote this?" She said, "You did, Mary. Wipe your eyebrow off and get on stage." And we literally turned around, walked out, did the whole Hot Honey Rag. It's
Having been in
wild. It
shows you've
doesn't
written,
stop.
I know that moment.
And this is truly a marathon. It does not stop from the moment we hit the stage. We are running. We do 24 songs, 20 costume changes in an hour, duets, solos, everything in between. I get my Norma Desmond moment, which I've always wanted. And it's just chock full of so much comedy that people who came to see it, they're like, I didn't know what to expect, but it's like everything. They were like, my sides hurt because I've been laughing so hard. And then you come out and you sing Rose's Turn and you make me cry. So it's got something for everybody in it. And the costumes are just gorgeous. They're so spectacular.
I didn't get to see it in P-Town. I'm so looking forward to it when you're here in New York for a week. But you're doing it in Chicago, New York, LA, and Palm Springs, right?
Yeah, so Chicago's really become my home away from home.
Yeah.
I started 2 years ago. I played Alban and Lakash there for 3 months. And just the best experience. Loved it so much. Met so many great people that became my extended family that we took our Golden Gals live show there for January and February of last year. Did so well that now we're coming back with Broadway for a couple of weeks this January going into February, and I'm excited. We've already got things on the books, in the works for 2025 in Chicago at the beginning of the year as well. So it's really, if I had to move any place and it wasn't New York City, I'd probably end up in Chicago.
Yeah, I love Chicago. I mean, I'm a Midwesterner, so
I do.
I love Chicago.
It's just everybody's so nice. Now I'm
Mhm.
not excited that when we do land there, it's -8 degrees.
Well, there's that.
But I've been in Florida for so long. I'm like, I need something to spice it up.
Where are you playing in Chicago? Where are you playing in New York? We've said you're at Green Room 42. What are our
So
venues?
we're at the Venus Cabaret, which is the cabaret venue attached to the Mercury Theater, which anybody in Chicago theater
Yep.
scene knows where the Mercury Theater is. It's absolutely gorgeous. I liked performing at the Mercury. I love performing at the Venus. We got to do our Hocus Pocus tour there. We kicked that off last year in that venue. It's like everywhere you sit, it reminds me a lot of the Beachmen in the sense that every place that you sit is its own personal show. You feel like you're not getting your view blocked, you're not experiencing something differently or worse than anybody else. You're having your own experience. It is really just a beautiful venue. And then in LA, we're at the Bourbon Room, the legendary Bourbon
Love
Room.
that.
And then in Palm Springs, where we close out the tour, we are at the Sonoran. I never know it's Sonoran, but we're at the Sonoran Resort, which I hear is lovely. I haven't been there yet.
Fantastic. And you're also
I do
producing
love
now.
Palm Springs, though.
You're producing Big Gay
Yeah.
Cabaret in Chicago.
I am. It's one of those things where like I have so many ideas that I can't possibly do them all myself. So we thought, wouldn't it be really fun if we kind of used what little bit of fame we have, what little bit of resources we have, and try to give back to the queer community. So we've created this spotlight series called the Big Gay Cabaret, which takes the idea that I used to do for myself, my tour,
Yep.
and it allows these queer artists to come in and they have an hour on stage to just be authentically themselves and to tell their story and to share themselves with the audience. And we've got a lot of really good feedback for it so far. Our first, can I say who it is? I can't say who it is, but he's queer and he's fabulous. And he used to be on TV and then he was in Rent and he's wonderful. So we're going to be announcing all of that very soon.
I think I'm figuring it out from
Yeah,
those hits.
and we're making sure that there's somebody for everybody.
Yeah.
So we've got trans people and lesbians and drag queens and gay men. Oh my, like there's literally anybody and everybody. We want to make sure you're represented and that you feel seen and that you feel heard and that there's somebody there that represents who you are.
Love that. Well, it is time for my last question. Then we'll have one more clip. Then we have a few audience questions. If you have not sent your audience question in yet, you can do that directly to me in the chat, and then I will read those. So send them to me. I've gotten a couple in already. Every episode of Cabaret Conversations, we're in season 4 now, has ended with this exact same question in a couple of words, in a couple sentences. Ginger, what is cabaret?
Cabaret is a musical from the 1960s starring Joel Grey, which I've actually gotten to play the MC 2 times in my life. I enjoyed it, but next time I think I'd like to play Sally Bowles. No, cabaret to me, it's we've talked about it really much throughout this whole conversation. It's the opportunity to have a space where everybody can come and be on the same page. We can all talk to each other and sing with each other and learn that my journey is yours and yours is mine. And it's a shared experience through song. I think there's something so special about that. You know, that's why musicals have always lasted the test of time, because when you can't say something, when the emotions are so high, you can't say it, you have to sing it. And that's exactly what cabaret gives us a chance to do.
That's great. That's a great answer. Here's our final clip for the evening, and then we'll go to some audience questions before we wrap up.
am what I am. I am my own special creation. So, come, take a look. Give me the hook or the ovation. It's my world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say, hey world, I am what I am. I am what I am. I don't want praise. I don't need pity. I bang my own drum. Some think it's noise. Well, I think it's pretty. And so what if I love each feather and each spangle? Why not try to see life from a different angle? Your life is a sham till you can shout out loud, I am what I am. I am what I am, and what I am needs no excuses. I deal my own deck, sometimes the ace, sometimes the deuces. There's one life, and there's no return and no deposit. One life, so it's time to open up your closet. Life's not worth a damn till you can say, hey world, I am what I
Classic.
One of the best nights of my life. That was crazy. It was such a crazy experience. They asked me to do that, and all they asked me was, we're doing a tribute to Harvey Fierstein with the All Stars 2 cast. So do you know I Am What I Am? I said, yeah, of course. I always close my show with I Am What I Am. I love that song. Like, oh, so you guys are just gonna be like dancing around to it. So then we get to rehearsal. I'm thinking like, oh, it's probably like the Gloria Gaynor, I Am What I Am. We're gonna dance a little disco, whatever. And I get there, and they're like, all right, you're over here, you're over here, you're over here, you're over here. Ginger, you're center stage. You just plant yourself and sing. I was like, sing? I'm singing? Which then made all the other girls go, whoa, 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 we're the backup singers? And they said, no, of course not. You won't be singing. You're the backup dancers. It was quite the contention for a minute until we actually put it all on its feet, and then everybody was like, oh, this makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah. And it was right after Pulse had happened, so it was kind of a tribute to that as well. I mean, it was like the week after, so it's just a whole lot of emotion. Of course, I had looked up to Harvey Fierstein for so long that I never get stage fright ever. It's such a comfortable place for me to be. I was shaking like a leaf. I was like this. I took a Xanax. I took a shot of whiskey, still shaking. Took another shot of whiskey, still shaking. Do the performance, have no memory of it. The only thing I remember is hitting that last pose and standing there and seeing Harvey crying on the monitors that they had up and everything. And then I just turned and I walked outside to smoke a cigarette. And I didn't even stop and go to the dressing room or anything. And they come out and they're like, Harvey wants to see you. And I'm like, then he better come out here. So next thing I know, Harvey Fierstein goes, honey, you made us all so happy. And I'm like, did I just make Harvey Firestein get up out of his seat and leave the building where they're honoring him to come and talk to me while I smoke a cigarette? It was so nerve-wracking, and I wanted to get it so right.
Mm.
And it's luckily one of those things that people still, they're just, millions of views later, they're still just talking about it and they keep bringing it up.
Well, it leads perfectly into the first audience question I got. This is from one of our regulars of the series. Meg sent this. What is it like for a young queer person from Leesburg, Florida, to now get to meet and work with some of your heroes and legends like Dolly and Bet and Jennifer Aniston and Harvey?
Well, they always say don't meet your heroes because they're going to disappoint you. That has never happened to me
Mhm.
ever. Like, to me, like, it's almost disappointing that I don't have any good bad stories about these folks. Whenever my first day on set for Dumplin', when we were filming that, I was just there for costume fittings. I wasn't even filming yet, and I'm sitting outside of the little costume trailer again, just smoking a little cigarette, just waiting, killing time. And Kathy and Jimmy comes up. Oh my God, you're here! You're here! Come with me. She grabs me by the hand, and I'm like, Mary Sanderson is leading me off. Like, should I be concerned? And she's taking me around the whole set, introducing me to everybody. And by the time we make the big loop, it's taken us about 45 minutes. We come back around, and I see that she has had my trailer moved directly next to hers. And she said, "You're going to be next to me for the whole movie, the whole time that we're here filming. I'm going to come over every morning. We're going to listen to Beyonce and do our makeup." And I was like, okay, whatever you want to do. And then we're in there on my first day on set. We're listening to Beyonce doing our makeup, and I hear knock, 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 knock on the door. And I open it, and it's Jennifer Aniston. And she's got a cup of coffee in her hand. And she's like, "I read in an interview that you really love this particular type of coffee. So I had it flown in, and there's some for you every single day. I'm just really excited that you're doing our movie." And then she handed it to me. She goes, "And by the way, my friend Courtney," I said, "Courtney Cox?" She goes, "Yeah, you know her?" I was like, "No, I don't know her, but I know who she is." She's like, "She wanted me to let you know that her and her daughter are really big fans." I was like, "Shut up, Jennifer Aniston, go away." So I drink my coffee, and she does. She brings it to me every day. Like, and then I got to meet at the premiere for Maleficent, Angelina Jolie. And I was like, well, now I have to be Team Jennifer. She's my friend and my coworker. I can't be nice to Angelina Jolie. She was probably one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. And it feels like the more I meet all of these people I've looked up to for so long, these divas of the
Yeah.
industry, they turn out to be the nicest, most grounded and well-rounded people who treat you like peers. They've already made it, so they're not worried you're going to steal their thunder. So they really encourage you, and it's been such a blessing to have that from literally everybody that I've looked up to. John Waters is one of those types of people that you can be in a deep conversation with him and you get interrupted and you don't see him for 2 years, but when you make eye contact, he picks up right where you left off. I got to host his book talk back when he released Liar Mouth a couple years ago, and I was doing it in LA. And he comes up to me. It's been 2 years since I've seen him, and picks right back up where we left off. He goes, "So we were talking about when you were 15 years old, your mom and your dad finally got a divorce." I'm like, "Oh my God, yes, we were talking about that." We have this whole conversation. He's just so invested in people. He finds so much. He gets so much out of conversation that it really encourages me to do that with other people. Like, I find myself being more invested in other people's stories and really paying attention.
Uh, Leslie has written, now that the book is out, even though you've told some of these stories in cabaret shows before, are we going to get a cabaret or theatrical staging of Southern Fried Sass?
It's very interesting that you say that because CJ and I have actually been talking about doing a show called I Can Cook Too. And we're trying to figure out a way where we can get all of the elements of the book into a stage show so that I can cook on stage, I can
Uh-huh.
sing, I can dance, an act, I could tell stories, I could take audience questions and give advice. I want it to be all of the really cool elements of the book because there's no other book like this in the world. It encompasses so many things that we want to make sure that we can give the proper spotlight to each and every one of those things in a live show. But we are working on it.
Fantastic. Well, that's going to be it for tonight because we are actually sadly at time. I knew this would happen with you and I because it happens anytime you and I are together where we just sit and lose track of time. You know, sitting at a restaurant in New York, we're like, oh, it's been 3 hours.
At a restaurant. I know. Where did we go? When Jinx and I were doing Xanadu, you and I went to that cafe where you get the cereal. Like, they have like all the cereal flavored things and
Mom's. We went to Mom's.
Mom's, yeah.
Yeah.
And we sat there for 3 hours, and then Jackie Cox came and joined us, and we ended up eating again. Like, we were there for I would say probably 7 hours that day. Yeah, just talking about
what happens.
Life and everything. Well, and that was in the midst of all the drama with Xanadu,
right,
which turned into Xanadu. We didn't do it. It was just such a weird time that I remember that day in particular was like, we're staying here all day because I have a lot of feelings and we're going to eat them and talk about them.
We're going to eat and talk about them. Exactly. Exactly. I have to do a little bit of 92i housekeeping before we say goodbye this evening, which is announcing our next run of guests. Those watching today are the first to hear about it. Next month, I have a rescheduled interview with James Jackson Jr. and John Andrew Morrison, who are, of course, known for their work in Strange Loop. Jam was Tony nominated for his work in that show. They're a great cabaret duo together. And then in March, I have the wonderful Sally Mays. And in April, a diva I absolutely adore, Mary Testa, will be joining me in the series. So if you've enjoyed today's interview, one, you can tell your friends about it, and they can go and watch the recording of this interview on 92nd Street Y's website. And you can sign up for our future episodes as well. Every episode of the series is available on the Wise website for rewatch. Ginge, it's been so great to talk to you.
And it has been great to talk to you. Can you deliver a message, a suggestion to Mary Testa for me?
I sure can.
I've just thought of this YouTube series that she can do where she can prank call people and call it testicles.
I think she has
testicles. To. She has to now. I'll produce it. I
mean, I'll send you her information via text. You can
send
give it to her yourself.
We're gonna do a whole YouTube series where Mary Testa prank calls people.
Testicles. I love it.
And she'll call them testicles.
Perfect. Ginge, I'm so glad we finally made this happen. You were part of the Cabaret Conversation series. It is so good to see you. I look so forward to seeing you in just a couple of weeks when you are back in New York where you belong.
Excited.
And we get to spend some actual time together.
To be back there. Yeah, me too.
Well, thank you.
You got to bring my Winnie the Pooh, my Jake.
I will.
Love you.
He sends his love. We'll talk soon, friend. Good to see you. Thank you for doing the show.
Bye.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks.